Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Tami, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm grateful to be here this evening. Heck, I'm grateful to be anywhere this evening sober, that's for sure. And I want to thank Judith for asking me to come out and share. And look, I'm just going to say it right off the gate so I don't get emotional, which I probably will. But, you know, it is inconceivable to me to have an Alcoholics Anonymous without Patty Ochoa. Patty's known me since very, very early in sobriety, and I want you newcomers to know that if you had told me 26 years ago that I would be asked to step in for Patty Ochoa, I would have laughed you out of the room. I was not a rocket to stardom in Alcoholics Anonymous. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous very agoraphobic. I did not go to a meeting alone without my sponsor for 12 and a half years. But Patty's been, you know, there's just certain people, including my sponsor Clancy and many others, many of the speakers here, where when I hear their voice, automatically my sober world feels safe. And Patty's certainly one of them. Patty, I guess, gave my name, and from what I heard later, her son Pat also did. I heard Don Landis had a little hand in that as well. And, she messaged me a couple of days and she said, Tami, I'm so glad that you're going. And that meant the world to me. And she said, you're going to have so much fun. It's really cold, but it's just that conference. She really, really had a special place in her heart for this conference. And then she said to me, Tami, do what you do. I said, that's pretty big shoes to fill, Tami. And she said, you don't have to fill my shoes. You just do your own deal. And she said, but I'm going to tell you what, I'm in denial and I'm very optimistic, and I want you to know that if I get well between now and then, I will boot you up till the day before. And that's that Patty humor. But I will tell you that I didn't know that she wouldn't be with us. I thought I would be here and be able to call her and tell her how it went. And our primary purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous, not our secondary, not our tertiary purpose, but the book tells us that our primary purpose is we must first stay sober ourselves, and then we're supposed to dedicate our sober lives to helping other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So we don't do this for money, and we don't put it before work and family and all of that. And I know people that are not alcoholic in our program, they don't understand that. But like the book says, your very life is at stake in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Your very life is at stake. And for our new girl, I already forget your name. I know it starts with an R. Was it? Raven. Raven, I beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. I come from Los Angeles, and there's a modicum of speakers that are hilarious. And they can come up and tell the story of depth and weight and have you rolling on the floors. And I wish I could tell you that I'm talented that way, and I'm not. But I will tell you that I don't know the price you paid for your seat here tonight in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the price I paid in that seat, or for any seat in any room of Alcoholics Anonymous, is I laid down a 5-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter for my seat in AA. Because a liquid called vodka, a liquid that looked no more or less innocuous than the clear water in this glass, was so powerful over my mind. It was more powerful than a love a mother had for her own 2 children. And I will never, ever be proud to share from this podium that I drank away the 2 little human beings that God blessed me with to love and to protect because of the power of a clear liquid called vodka. And if drinking away 2 children is in some way funny to you, then I don't know what to tell you, but I'm going to tell you something. At almost 26 years sober, it does not ever feel good to share that. I spoke one time, and my daughter loved Seattle, and my husband at the time wasn't able to go. And I remember my daughter asked if she could come. And after I was done sharing, and of course she lived through it, she had a front row seat. But I did become sober when my daughter was 6 and my son was 5. When the judge took my kids away from me, that was just too high a price to pay, and I was done. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous with the willingness of the dying that they talk about in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I never wanted to drink again, and I wanted my kids back. And we cannot promise you that you're going to get your kids back, or your wife back, or your husband back, or anybody back. But if you're estranged from anybody that you love because as a direct result of your drinking, you sure got a heck of a better chance at getting them back in your life in some capacity if you be sober. And I remember when I was done speaking, this guy walked up to my daughter, And here I thought, wow, I was younger in sobriety, and I thought, I really moved the room, I kind of had them in the palm of my hand, right? And for a person who came in agoraphobic, I'm one that I can do really well talking to a sea of people, but I still struggle just talking one-on-one. So I'm one of those people that I have those few close friends that I keep real close to me, but I'm not one that has a plethora, and I don't flit around with a whole bunch of friends. But I remember after I got done speaking, I thought I had done a good job, and this guy walks up to me, to my daughter, and he says, your mom has one of the greatest stories I've heard in Alcoholics Anonymous. And my kid said, not if you were her kid. And you know who carried the message that night to that room and to her own mother? Was my daughter. Because I'm in a room where 500 people applauded me after I told my pathetic little story. But that little girl had to live through all of that at 6 years old, stone cold sober, with no drugs or alcohol or anything to medicate her pain. And I'm up here sharing my story, but I didn't have a whole lot of pain during that time because I drank through all of it. I also want to acknowledge, look, my mom is in hospice right now, and death is imminent, and she was just upgraded yesterday, and I don't know if she's going to survive till tomorrow, and I don't know. The hospice said that whatever they know, and her feet are turning black, and she's on 100% oxygen right now, and they can't turn it up higher. And my mom is 90 years old, and my sponsor, Clancy, said, you know what, old age is a luxury that many people don't enjoy, and my mom's had a good life, so in no way do I mean to be sad or anything about it, but I remember calling my friend Rob and just saying, Rob, I'm just going to go say goodbye to my mom before I go give this talk in honor of Patty, but would you come with me? And he came, and he's come with me several times, and he just said, Tam, it's bad. He goes, it's bad. And I just said, my biggest fear, Rob, is I just don't want to be on the road so far away from home and get that call. But I do want you to know that I took a week off work right before Christmas, and I spent that whole week just me and Mom. And I gave her meds, and I rubbed her feet, and I helped her with her oxygen, and I brushed her little hair, and she would pet my face until she kind of slipped into semi-consciousness, and we had a really good week. And we've been current for a really long time because of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I told my friend Rob, and I went home last night, and he said, it's bad, Tam, but Rob's just one of those friends. He's only got 2.5 years of sobriety, but I'll tell you something, I'd put his sobriety up against a lot of people that I know with time. He's just a really good soul. And I showed up at the airport this morning at 5 a.m., and I go to the gate, and there's Rob. And I go, what are you doing here? And he goes, I'm going to North Dakota. And I'm like, wait, what? And he goes, I'm going to go with you. And my husband had 2 really severe heart attacks several months ago, and he had to have 2 stents and a valve replacement. And my husband has 38 years of sobriety, and normally he travels with me to these things. And he just said, Tammy, I knew you couldn't go with Patrick, and I just don't want you to get that call without somebody being there. And it turns out Rob bought a ticket, and he registered for the conference, and he got himself a hotel room, and he never even told me, and he escorted me here today, and yeah. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous. We start to think more about others. I also want to commend all the other speakers. They know me well, and I know them well, and I don't want to come in and, hey, I'm going to show up, speak, and leave, but I didn't know I was going to be doing this, and so I couldn't plan time off work, and so I apologize to them, and they know because we do this a lot together. My condolences to you, Pat, and to your son, Eden, and I have never, ever had a conversation with your mom that didn't involve how proud she was with you. And I knew your mom before you got sober, and that was such an ache in her heart. And I know that your mom is resting in eternal peace because she doesn't have to worry about her son, and she knows you're right there to take care of her grandson, which were the 2 most loved things in her life. And again, a gift from Alcoholics Anonymous. So my condolences to you. I have a home group. It's called the Pacific Group. I did not get sober in the Pacific Group, but I've been there for the last 7 years after my sponsor died. And I picked up a new sponsor, and some of you may have heard of this old guy. His name is Clancy, and Clancy's been my sponsor in good stead for the last 7 years. The Pacific Group is out in Los Angeles, and we're the largest weekly meeting in the world. We run anywhere between 800 and 1,000 a week. We have, my husband's on the coffee crew, so we have 40 people on our coffee crew alone. And And it's a fine oiled machine. It really is. Clancy's been phenomenal for me. His voice is way louder than mine, and he's one of the few people that can really get me to take actions that I don't want to take or against my own will in the name of something better because I trust him. There are 3 things that Clancy told me out the gate. He said, when he started sponsoring me, I already had 18 years, and he said, Tami, number 1, I want you to always act better than you feel. So if you don't feel well and someone walks up and says how you're doing, you don't have the right to drop all of your stuff on them. He goes, always act better than you feel. That's imperative for an alcoholic. He said, number 2, you don't have the right to wear your emotions on your sleeve and infect the whole room with them. And he said, because emotions, I believe, are the greatest downfall to any alcoholic. And he finally said, number 3, well, there was 4 things. He said, number 3, don't ever make money off of Alcoholics Anonymous, either directly or indirectly, because there will always be opportunities to do it. But if you slept on someone's couch, and I did, my sponsor's couch the first 8 months, and you were driven to meetings and you were taken and networked out in the fellowship so that you could get a good start, then you do that for someone else. And my husband and I have always had somebody sober. We just had a girl, and she's left, and now she's got over a year and a job, and she's a tax-paying, hard-working citizen and a car and car insurance. We have a kid that moved in a while back. Now he's got 8 months, and you know what? What a joy that some of us rob ourselves of. Can we all do that? No. I'm fortunate. I have an extra bedroom in our house, and it's not always convenient, but that's been a great joy. And finally, Clancy told me, Tami, acceptance is just agreeing to what already is, and there's a peace in being powerless. And my biggest fear is that I cannot control or fix something. And my mom is going to die in the next couple of days. And all I have to do is accept that, and I'm going to be okay. And I have a son that was diagnosed 3 years ago with a very debilitating illness with no cure, and it's degenerative. And you know what? Once I was able to accept that, we could get into the best way that we could help him. As a result of my son's illness, I'm 59 and my husband is 71, and this past year we adopted his 4-year-old son. And my husband and I, at 71 and 59, are raising a little 4-year-old, and we're flipping exhausted. But you know what? Because of strong sponsorship and not allowing me to suck my thumb or take a little edge or easy way out, for a little girl that 26 years ago came in here and I could not even take care of my own self, let alone my children. I drank away my kids, my husband, and my home. I've been able to take care of my mom who's been in hospice, an ex-husband that got severely ill who lives with my husband and I, a 4-year-old grandson, and my mentally disabled son. And you know what? Left to my own devices, I puke in a porcelain bowl. So that's not a victory for Tami, because left to my own devices, I can't do things like that. But with the help of you good people and a lot of my friends right here, you get to rewrite your script in Alcoholics Anonymous. So young Raven or any of our new people, if you don't like the script of your life, quit blaming or thinking about why it's the way it is. Ask somebody, can I put my hand in yours? And can you help me to rewrite the script of my life with the grace of God? And miracles have been done, and I'm sure you've heard that in all your speakers. I've had my first drink when I was 13, and I've come to understand after reading the book Alcoholics Anonymous that it turns out I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. I didn't understand that at 13. I don't know what an alcoholic is. I'm described in the book Alcoholics Anonymous as an alcoholic that is never mildly intoxicated. I'm always more or less insanely drunk. So I'm like either sober or like, drunk, there's like no in between. So when people say, oh, I partied for a long time, or I got a buzz or whatever, I was either sober or drunk. I do not like the taste of alcohol. I have never liked the taste of alcohol. Toward the end of my drinking, I used to have to plug my nose and uncap the vodka and down it as quickly as I could, and then recap the vodka, because God forbid I would smell it. I'd start to retch and gag before I could just keep it down long enough to heat up my chest and give me that ease and that comfort once it hit my brain. I drink solely for the effect. There's nothing in alcohol that I really like except when it heats up my chest and hits my brain, and it alters my perception of reality. I'm also described in AA vernacular. It's not written in the book. I'm what's in AA vernacular called a puking blackout drunk. There's never, ever been a time that I drank beverage alcohol, that I did not puke my guts out. I wish I could tell you I vomited. It's a little more demure and feminine, but I'm that girl that trains of barf particles on your tie and in your shoes. But that's how hideously allergic I am to beverage alcohol. From 13 years old, I drank it, and it's like my body rejected it. Excuse me. And I'm also a blackout drinker, and again, I can only share with you my experience, but when I drink beverage alcohol, I go into these lapses of memory that I do strange and incredible things that I would be mortified to do in a sober state of mind, only to feel that pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization that they talk about in this book the next day when people would tell me what I'd done the night before. But I don't understand any of that. I don't know what an alcoholic is. I ran away from home at age 15, and this literally had nothing to do with my alcoholism. But I share about it from the podium when I get a chance to, because many well-meaning, and it's very important that you hear many well-meaning healthcare professionals led me to believe that this did have to do with why I drank. Our stories just close in a general way, so I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but I had been put in 3 foster homes prior to the age of 15 because of the illicit nature of the relationship my father had with my sister and I. If you were a girl and you had a budding teenage body, you weren't safe to live at home with my dad. Sorry, normally that doesn't upset me. And so at 15, I was 15 and my sister was 16, and she ran away from home. And I was stuck home alone that year with my dad, and it wasn't a good year. And I'm a high school English teacher by profession today. And out in Los Angeles, if you're what we call a system kid, you have what's called an orange folder, and all the general population kids have a manila folder. And we used to call the orange folder the pumpkin. So I'm what's called a pumpkin kid because I was a kid that was in a foster home or in the, quote, system. So pumpkin kids have to see guidance counselors much more often than the manila folder typical general ed kids. And we have to see a guidance counselor once a week. So my guidance counselor was getting suspicious because I wasn't looking her in the eye and I wasn't explaining absences that made any sense. So she got suspicious and she sent child services out to my mom's home where my dad had been removed 6 years earlier. But see, Dad was in this special program that he had to complete, but Mom ran out of money after 6 months. So Dad started to look around again, and she had taken Dad back in. So I'm in my first year of high school, and when the child services went out to my home and they found my dad there, they removed my dad, and they told me that I had to go into another foster home that afternoon and that I couldn't go back home. And I didn't want to go because it was the first time I had to go to a foster home without my big sister, and I was scared. So, what's wrong with me today? I'm tired, menopausal. And the lights were nice and dim for the other speakers. It's really bright. Anyway, and so I was scared, and so I just asked that guidance counselor if I could use the restroom at the end of the hall, and she let me go, and I literally just climbed the fence after school, and I ran away from home, and I ran away from school. And I'm one of those gooky kids, thank you. School is not usually things that we migrate toward. School is a tremendous amount of discipline and structure over a really, really long period of time. And you have to do that discipline and that structure with no instant gratification and make a lot of sacrifices and not do things you want to do so that you could go to school in order to way down the road have something better. And we don't kind of migrate toward those fields. We want to do something that feels good now. But I'm an English teacher, and I have found that children escape painful childhoods in different ways. And for me, it was always through literature, and it still is. For those of you who know my husband, Patrick, I am still at my happiest, locked up in my house with a good book and my dog by my side. And when I was a kid, there was all these atrocities going on at home and infidelities and abuse, and I would go upstairs and I would escape to faraway lands and normal families through literature. So it's no wonder I became a literature teacher later in life, but because I read so much, I was a really good test taker because most tests are reading based. So school was always the safe place for me to land. I loved school. I can see a couple of people shaking their heads. They know what I'm talking about. Yeah, home wasn't the safe place for me to land. But at school, I was academic, I was very athletic, and I was popular. I was a decent little kid back then, so I was quite popular at school, and then home never felt safe. So when I was about 9 years old, they built this huge tennis complex across the street from my childhood home. And I started to go over that tennis complex because I just really never wanted to be home. And I used to go over there and I'd watch like Wimbledon and stuff on TV, so I decided to be the ball girl at 9 years old, and I'd run back and forth at the net and throw the good players their balls back, and they'd tip me a couple of quarters. And when I was 9 years old, this coach, this very famous old pro that had taken over this complex, he was put in charge of it, noticed I had real hand-eye coordination and a propensity for, hand racket sports, and he started training me. So at 9 years old, he started to train me, and by the time I was 15 years old, I was ranked 23 in the state of California as an upcoming tennis amateur ready to try the junior pro circuit. So my goal through my childhood was always, I'm gonna make the junior pro circuit at 16, and then I get to leave my crazy family and travel with the junior pro circuit. So dropping out of high school at 15 shot all those chances. And because now I'm a runaway. Well, he eventually located me and he just said, Tami, I've invested 6 years of my life. You're going to make the junior pro circuit. I have a condominium with an extra bedroom. Why don't you come and stay with me, and I'll go to court and child services with you until we can find you a safe place to live. So I moved in with him. He was 40 and I was 15. And for very obvious reasons, I was a very precocious, sexualized 15-year-old. And I moved in the auspices that he was going to get me back in school and back in a safe place to live. But after 3 weeks, he fell to the temptation, and I just became his live-in girlfriend. And I never did go back to school, and I never did report back to child services. So I was basically a runaway, or what they call a ward of the state. So I lost the only modicum of safety that I had ever known because I had to leave school. And now I'm living with a 40-year-old man at 15. Anyway, to make a long story short, he had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and they would come and visit, and by no means did his ex-wife know I was 15, or he'd probably go to jail. But I remember one afternoon, I got into some tequila. I don't know, I call it tequila if you're an alcoholic of my type. And I did some shooters of tequila. I went into a blackout. I acted like a complete crazy person in front of this guy's little kids that were visiting for the weekend. They went home and told Mom, and he was no longer allowed to see his children on the weekend as long as I'm living there. So at 15 years old, a clear gold liquid called tequila, I've now jeopardized his chance to see his kids, their chance to be with their dad, his ex-wife's chance to have a break on the weekend, and I'm just 15 years old, and alcohol is just causing all this problem in my life, but I don't make that connection. So he doesn't know what to do with me, and eventually he talks me into taking the GED exam, which is a battery of 5 tests, and if you pass each subcategory with a certain score, it's equivalent to having a high school diploma. Well, I'm a good test taker, and they're reading-based tests, so at 16 years old, I'm sitting taking this GED exam in a big auditorium, and it wasn't my idea, but the flavor of the month wanted me to do it, and he's paying my rent and buying me clothes, so I'm like, okay. And about 6 weeks later, we received notification that I indeed passed this GED exam, and we get the notification, and he takes me down to a local community college out in Los Angeles, and it turns out that his friend is the coach of the tennis team. So he has me try out for his friend's tennis team, and I'm good enough to play number 2 varsity string. And then he walked me right over to admissions and records and enrolled me in 12 units with the hope that I'd go traveling with his tennis team every weekend and that I'm in school all day so I don't cause any more problems for him. And I did what the book talks about. It says that we have special skills, aptitudes, and abilities. We not only can build a bright outlook for ourselves, but even for our loved ones. And then we pull it all down over our head with a senseless series of sprees. But I don't understand those kinds of patterns. I don't even know what an alcoholic is. So I go in there and it's like I swear off alcohol with a solemn oath. I'm not going to drink again because it almost lost me, the place to live. And I do that about face, and I'm going to become academic, athletic Tami. And so I go down to the local health food store and I drop $100 and I want brown rice and yogurt and kashi for breakfast. And I start going to school and I cannot get a B. I have to get an A because that's how tightly wound I am to keep me from drinking. And I'm playing for that tennis team and I'm working out, and I go to the local beauty supply and I want conditioners and emollients for my hair because maybe if I look better on the outside, it'll take care of this crazy things that live inside of me. And for 2 years, from 16 to 18, I shaved my legs, I painted my toenails, I conditioned my hair. I played and won awards on that tennis team. I couldn't get an A, B, I had to get an A. I was on the dean's list all 4 semester. And I graduated at 18 years old with the Chancellor's Award at that school for academic and/or athletic excellence. But I only drank 2 times, literally 2 times, from 16 to 18. And both times, because I'm an alcoholic that is never mildly intoxicated, I'm always more or less insanely drunk. Both times, 2 times only, like it wasn't like there were other times. I got arrested for public drunkenness, and because I was a ward of the state and under the age of 18, once I was arrested for public drunkenness and they saw my record, they put me in one of those adolescent lockdown facilities. You know, a lot of us have visited those. And of course, I go in, you know, blaring drunk and cussing out cops and swinging and whatever. And with 24 hours of sobering up, they got that orange pumpkin folder. And guess what my diagnosis became? Emotional and mental disorders, trauma due to childhood, and post-traumatic stress syndrome. They never even focused on the drinking. And those doctors rightfully treated the symptoms of depression, anxiety, and insomnia because I was they felt I was depressed, and that's why I was drinking the way I drank. And I couldn't sleep at night, so they gave me medications to help me sleep. And I can't handle life on life's terms because I have to get an A, I can't get a B, and I've got a little, you know. And that's the kind of structure and discipline I have to impose upon myself to keep bad girl Tammy away. And at 16 years old, I already know there's good girl Tammy, the one that, you know, dresses good and works out and makes straight A's. But bad girl Tammy keeps catching up to me, man, and I'm having to run faster and faster. But never once was I given the diagnosis of alcoholism. And they gave me all those medications, but nothing ever got better. Because the medical model does not work for a person with a spiritual malady. I don't have a medical malady. I have a spiritual malady. But most of us, it says in the book that when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically, but we do it ass backwards. We go to psychiatrists to straighten out mentally, and we go to doctors to straighten out physically, and the book says you got to straighten out spiritually, and those other 2 things will straighten out. And I can't say for anybody else, but for me, from the day I decided to surrender my right to drink alcohol in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have never been in a lockdown unit or had to take any type of medications or have any kind of psychiatric help. Now, that doesn't mean down the road I may not. But that is definitely just my story. People always get offended, and you know what? I have a son with schizophrenia, and my son has 4 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And God help the sucker that tells my son that he needs to go off his antipsychotic meds, you know, because he would not maybe go psychotic, he would go psychotic. And he's got a beautiful sponsor named Robert C. that always says to my son, you know, one of the best things you do, buddy, and by the way, Pat Ochoa, 12-step, my kid. You know, Pat Ochoa drove 3 hours one day, and he drove all the way up and walked into my house, wanted nothing to do with me. I think I had like 20 years sober at the time, and nothing to do with my husband, who had 34 years. Walked right past us, went into my son's room, sat and talked to him for an hour. My kid comes out, and he goes, "Mom, can you iron a shirt for me?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he went in the car with Pat, and then they drove 3 hours down to some other place where Pat spoke, and then he drove him back. And my son has 4 years sober today, and my son was devastated too when he heard about your mom, and he always says, "I want to be a dad like Pat Ochoa," and my son has a 4-year-old, and you know what? He's a dad like Pat Ochoa because you were a role model to him. And so these people, and I hang around a lot of young people in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'll tell you, man, they make me look at myself and my lazy program or my, you know, thinking I've got this down program. And God, I just can't believe how far you've come, Pat, and how much that means to me. So anyway, I have no idea. Oh yeah, so now I'm playing tennis and all this and that, and I'm good behavior for a while, but I graduate, and I finally, at 18 years old, I've got a Chancellor's Award, and I have an opportunity to go to any one of 5 state universities in the state of California, and they'll pay my tuition, my housing, my textbooks, and my living expenses for 2 more years if I just play tennis on their team and take 12 units or more at their college. And guess what I did, guys? There's my alcoholic. I quit. Man, I'm 18 years old, and I'm flipping exhausted. I had just been too good for too long, and there was no way I could go another 2 years of that discipline and structure of making straight A's and not drinking and doing all the things that I have to do to keep bad girl Tammy away, and bad girl Tammy away, to heck with it. I'm tired, and I quit. And I do what I do best, which is just let bad girl Tammy take over. And I start sleeping around and doing the stupid stuff that some of us do. And I kept cheating on that boyfriend, and we'd make up and we'd break up, and he'd throw me out and he'd take me back, and just creating havoc in everybody's lives. But I ended up getting a felony DUI, and I got put in jail at 21 years old. And sure enough, that boyfriend, the tennis player, bailed me out one more time. And now I've been living off this guy since I was 15, and I'm 21 years old. And I swore off alcohol with a solemn oath. I'm never going to drink again, and I'm going to go back to school because that's when I do okay. So I go to Cal State University, Northridge out in Los Angeles, and I say, I'm not going to take 12 units. This time I'm taking 15. Maybe that was the mistake. And I can't be a tennis pro at all anymore because I'm 21 years old, and I've been playing pickup games at really expensive clubs down in Marina Del Rey in Los Angeles, but I'm not training, and I'm way washed out at 21 years old to make anything of tennis. So I decide this time I'm going to become a triathlete. So I go down to the local health food store, and I drop now $200 because things are more expensive, and I want brown rice and yogurt and kashi for breakfast, and I got a mountain bike, and I'm riding a bike, and I'm swimming laps, and I'm lifting weights, and I'm going to school, and I cannot get a B, I have to get an A, and I'm doing the same thing expecting different results. And I'm on prescribed good behavior for prescribed amounts of time. But my brief intervals of recovery aren't lasting as long, and one day this really, really handsome guy moves in right next door to Dennis and I, and he's got a triathlete shirt on, and I noticed him and he noticed me, and I sidled over to him and I said, hey, are you moving in? And he said, yeah, I'm an OBGYN, and I'm going to be working right here at Northridge Hospital, but I'm kind of new to the area. And I said, are you a triathlete? And he said, I am. And I said, me too. And he said, do you know a good gym? And by 6 a.m. the next morning, I met him, and we ran like 6 miles together. Then I took him down to my gym, and I signed him up at my gym, and he's spotting me with weights, and I'm spotting him. And that following Wednesday, we're laying out by the pool because he has Wednesday afternoons off his medical practice, and we're talking. Now, the fact I've been living with another guy next door, and like a wall separates my condo from him, just an incidental, you know how we roll, right? And I knew he really liked me, but poor Rick met me in a swearing off period. And I was academic, athletic, and outgoing Tami. And Dennis and I one day got drinking, and we got into one of those knockdown physical fights that we can get into. And it resulted in that Dr. Rick next door calling the police because he thought the fight was loud and dangerous. And the police show up, and Dr. Rick is standing behind the police going, is Tami okay? Is Tami okay? And my boyfriend Dennis is talking to the police, and we finally get rid of Dennis, and we get rid of that neighbor Rick, and the police, and we get rid of that neighbor Rick, and then Dennis and I go upstairs and do one of those all-night passionate makeups that we do after the police leave, and we beat the crap out of each other and cause, oh baby, you're my soulmate, I love you, because we're so dramatic and we're so whack, and we spend the night, God, like talking to, telling we love each other like a bad Hallmark card or something, and I wake up the next morning and I do exactly what's described in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, that after a while an alcoholic cannot separate the true from the false, that after a while the only life we really come to understand is our drinking life. And I thought nothing the next morning of taking a little liquid makeup, covering up the black eyes and the choke marks, putting a backpack on my back and going off to Cal State Northridge like there's nothing wrong with my life. About 2 o'clock that afternoon, I'm pulled into the underground parking. Now, I've been beaten up the night before, so my body physically hurts. I had been drinking the night before, so I'm hungover. I hadn't slept the night before because we professed our love to each other all night long like a bad Hallmark card. And I've been sitting in classes all day, and my brain hurts. And I park in the underground parking, and I walk toward that subterranean elevator, and my jaw is tight, and my back is tightly wound, and my jaw is rigid, and everything hurts, and a thought occurs to me. In just a few minutes, liquid relief is just moments away. There's a huge bottle of vodka on my counter. And I start walking toward that elevator that I could barely walk to because I was so tightly wound, and I got a little light walk in my step, and my jaw loosens up. Now, I haven't seen the vodka, I haven't tasted the vodka, I haven't smelled the vodka, but thinking about a clear liquid called vodka that looks no different in this water, my entire demeanor and outlook changed because I knew liquid relief is a-coming. And if you identify with that, you're probably an alcoholic because clear liquids do not have that kind of power over most people. And I get into that elevator just feeling like it's a-coming, it's a-coming. And as I go to push button number 3, there's Dr. Rick standing right at the elevator. And I start pushing that closed door button, and he wedges his hand between the door, and he walks into the elevator. And prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, and even now, like I said, I'm good with the crowd, I still have a hard time looking people in the eye, and I will practice looking at you a millisecond longer sometimes than it feels comfortable. And therapists said, oh, you know, it's the shame from your dad. I don't know what it is, man. It doesn't really matter, but it's something I need to work on. But he said, Tammy, he goes, you need to tell me what happened last night. And prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and having a good sponsor like Clancy, and these gentlemen, not only the women, but the gentlemen who taught me and treated me like a lady before I even knew what one was. You know, I came in with a tremendous amount of cussing and foul language, a tremendous amount of sexually inappropriate behavior and humor and attire. And I remember saying to Rick, you know, you effing know what went down last night, man. You're the one that called the effing cops, and I don't want to effing talk about it. And instead of him going like, whoa, and putting him off his footing, he just took his hands and he put them on my shoulder and he stared at me. And I was so uncomfortable, and I realized like the tough attitude wasn't going to put him off his game. So I pull out the seductress, and I grab his silk fossil tie, and I yank his neck into mine, and I smell his cologne, and I said, Doctor, God, you smell amazing. And he just stepped back, and he took my chin, and he held it so I couldn't wiggle away. And he said, my God, Tammy, he said, I've really come to care for you. And he says, you're such an enterprising, talented young woman, but there is something so wrong with you, and I want to help you, but I don't know what's wrong with you. And that's the worst thing you can hear if you're an alcoholic suffering from alcoholism, because I've always known there's something wrong with me. Since I was 6 years old, I knew there was something wrong with me. I've had 10 years of therapists telling me that I'm not wired right and my perception is not right because of the 10 years of abuse that I had at the hands of my father. And I'm in my 20s now, and I don't want you to know that I know and doctors know and my family knows that I'm not normal. So I'm just trying to fake it, and I've got this whole fake life because I'm so scared to death because I know there's something wrong with me. And another human being hit me right between the eyes. But see, I'm at the point in my drinking that I'm now constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself about the role that alcohol plays in my life, and more importantly, the role I play in the lives of other people. But for whatever reason, and today I know it was the grace of God, I told Rick the cry of every alcoholic. I told him about my dad, and I told him about my childhood, and I told him one day I'm going to finish my education, and one day when I finish my education, I'm not going to be with these abusive men, and one day, and one day, and one day. Because the cry of every alcoholic is, look, I know my life's a little whack, but I have a plan. And when my plan comes together, it's all going to be okay. And newcomers, every alcoholic has a plan. It's never a good plan. That's why we need to be sponsored. No human power can relieve you of alcoholism. Not your mommy, not your daddy, not your therapist, not even your sponsor can relieve you of alcoholism. But God can, and he will if you seek him. It doesn't say God should or he might. It says he can, and he will. And as sponsors, when we see that surrender, Carla and I were talking about it, it's not surrendering to me or to her. When we see that surrender, then we know that we can allow God to work through us to help them, you know, and that's what this deal is all about. And anyway, the condition of, where was I? Oh, anyway, one day I got in a really bad fight with my boyfriend Dennis, and I came up with a really good idea drunk. You know, things weren't going really well with Dennis and I knew that doctor next door had a huge crush on me, and I had the key to his condominium unit because I used to take care of his exotic fish and plants when he would travel to medical conventions. And my plan that morning was to just take all my stuff out of Dennis's apartment and move them next door into Dr. Rick's. And I was drunk, so it was like drunk moving and drunk decision making. And Dennis came home that afternoon, and there I wasn't. I just like moved everything out. And Rick came home that afternoon, and there I were. And remember, there's just one wall separating us. And really my goal was that when Rick told me he knew something was wrong with me, I saw him look at me with pity. And I just wanted to get that Dr. Rick between the sheets so I could replace that broken image that I saw of me reflected in his eyes the night before and replace it with Tami, the sexual goddess, because I didn't want him to think about me as being broken, because I can't think of me as being broken, because then I need help. And 3 weeks later, first of all, are there any Al-Anons in the room tonight? Al-Anons? Okay, Al-Anons, you'll get this. They won't, so I'm not going to even try to explain it to them because I don't get it. Dr. Rick not only let me stay Al-Anons, but 3 weeks later, he walked me down the aisle and he said, I do. And the day that Dr. Rick said, I do, was the day that he qualified for Al-Anon, because his life was not the same after that for many years. Look, it's taken me a long time in Alcoholics Anonymous to admit that I punished Rick for everything that my father had ever done to me. I punished Rick for, and many men, but mostly Rick, for a crime that they never even committed. And through the grace of God and good sponsorship and step work in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm married to an Irishman named Patrick right now for 15 years, and he's not the enemy. And we don't go to bed like going in the enemy camp anymore. And I can finally feel free to truly love. And I realize that not all men were like my dad, but my dad had some problems. But it's taken me a long time. But poor Dr. Rick paid the price. That marriage produced 2 children, and today I have a daughter, Chelsea, that's 32. She turned 2 days ago. And my son, Alex, is 31. And through the grace of God, I was so physically sick with both my children when I was pregnant. I could not stand the smell of alcohol. I had a condition called hyperemesis, so I didn't drink through all my pregnancies, which is very important to me now because my son at 26 was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I think I always would have wondered if I'd caused that. And I've been assured by all his doctors that I haven't. And again, like Clancy says, it doesn't matter. He has schizophrenia, Tami, and you need to just put on your big girl panties and be the best sober mom to an adult boy with schizophrenia. But things started to spiral out of control, and my drinking started to escalate. And to make a long story short, Rick got to the point where he had to hire a full-time housekeeper to stay home and make sure that I didn't drink and drive with those kids in the car. He was sending our kids out to full-time daycare, working the hours that he works as an OB/GYN, delivering babies all night and seeing office patients all day. And I don't work and I don't go to school, and I have someone paying my rent and someone taking care of my children, and it's suicide if you're an alcoholic of my type. And I spiraled out of control really quickly. And I ended up driving one day on the 118 freeway and seeing a call box, and in my drunken stupor, thinking it was a payphone, and saying, you know, I want to make a phone call. And I plowed my car into that call box, and I'm standing in front of a woman judge, and she looked at my rap sheet, and she said, Tami, she said, I'm going to put you in a lockdown facility for alcoholism. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I'd been in 2 lockdown facilities at 15 to 18 years old, never once for the diagnosis of alcoholism, but both times I was picked up for public drunkenness, and the diagnoses were mental and emotional disorders and trauma due to childhood. When my daughter was 3 years old, I was seeing the top psychiatrist that money could buy because my husband's a surgeon and I have all this access to UCLA, and I'm taking all these medications and nothing's getting better, and I'm going to therapy 3 days a week for all kinds of money and making my family come to groups to talk about me and my pain. And I took a bottle of antidepressants one day, the whole bottle, because my husband said, I'm not going to go to your stupid groups and talk about you and your pain anymore. Your 3- and 4-year-old have a lot of pain and they don't get to take all those medications. So I was so mad, I took a whole bottle of antidepressants, and then my head started to like float off and my heart started to palpitate. And I gave my daughter the phone, and she called 911, and my daughter was 4. And I was put in a lockdown facility for 42 days on that attempted suicide. And now I'm 32 years old, and I'm being put in my 4th lockdown facility. And those doctors told me what they'd been telling me since I was 15 years old. Tami, you're clinically depressed as a result of the abuse you faced in your childhood. The best hope for you is being institutionalized for episodic depression and mental and psychiatric treatment, but none of this is your fault. Later, when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, people like Clancy, Carla, Dawn, and my old-timers had a new name for the effect that alcohol appeared to have on me, as described word for word in this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. In that lockdown facility, I told those doctors I'd wake up out of blackouts and go downstairs. I'd see broken glass, broken children, a broken husband, a broken home. I'd go back upstairs, suck my thumb, and think of ways to kill myself. And of course, I had that very feeble attempt at suicide. And those doctors told me that through talking therapy and institutionalization, there's really no other hope for me. But again, none of this is my fault. Later, when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor, Clancy, who wasn't my sponsor at the time, but he heard me share one day, had a new name for a mother that attempted to take her own life in front of her 4-year-old without giving a crap how it would affect that little girl. He called it alcoholism, selfishness, self-centeredness. The world revolved around me and my childhood pain. Forget that I have 2 little kids in their childhood. It's always about me and my pain. In that lockdown facility, I told those doctors that on my swearing off periods, I'd steal my husband's credit cards and money out of his wallet, and I'd go to the gym, work out with all you men, of course. And then I'd take all you men up to the pub, buy drinks on my husband's dime, always playing the big shot, taking credit for money I never even earned. And in that lockdown facility, they told me that taking money from my husband was really my way, and to get approval from other men, was really my way indirectly of buying back that unacceptance that I had been given from my father. So none of those actions were really my fault. Later, when I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, Clancy had a new name for that too. He called it stealing. And not only did I steal my husband's money and play the big shot with other men on his dime, but as a wife and a mother of 2 small children, I used to go to those cheesy daytime motels with the men I met at the gym. And let's just say I did what drunken alcoholic women do in those cheesy daytime motels. And in that lockdown facility, they told me that my dad gave me a script when I was 5 years old, that my only worth was my sexuality. And all I was doing in those motel rooms was acting out that script that I'd been so poorly given in that childhood. But none of those actions in those hotel rooms were really my fault. And later, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, Clancy and my first old-timer sponsor had a new name for that too. They called it cheating. See, by the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd been in 4 lockdown facilities, had 10 years of the best therapists and medications that money could buy, to find out that living inside of me was a broken human being because of the actions of another person, in this case, my father. And for a buck in the basket, the old-timer said, "No, kid, you're a liar. You're a cheat, you're a thief, and you're probably just an alcoholic suffering from alcoholism." And God, I needed it to be so much more. You know, young people in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a universal truth in these rooms that's not even mentioned in this book. So I'm going to tell you a really, really big secret, and this is all you get out of my talk tonight. I want you to keep this really dear to your heart. If you don't like and respect our old-timers, don't worry about it. You're never going to be one. There you go. You got the secret. Our longtime members of Alcoholics Anonymous are some of our most disrespected, untapped resource. So the condition of my getting out is I have to start going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And I come to meetings late, and I leave meetings early, and I wear really, really low-cut tops, and I was a lot younger then, and these little Daisy Duke shorts, and I spend most of my time in the parking lot flirting with you men, and I took 5 of those 30-day chips. But what I did not mention to you is my husband had started going to Al-Anon. And Al-Anon rightly convinced my husband to remove his 2 small children from a mother that had been in 4 lockdown facilities, had all kinds of therapy and all kinds of support, and is driving drunk with them in the car and refuses to get sober. And my husband had tried to evict me through the courts, and I created such a scene in the medical community and in front of our children that one night he kidnapped our children in the middle of the night. And we have a beautiful 5-bedroom, 4,000 square foot home, and my husband decided to raise those 2 kids in a 1-bedroom hotel room rather than live with drunken me. And he kidnapped those kids, and he left. And I remember I went and I got drunk, and I came back the next day to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I told you all about God and how wonderful my life was, and I took a fake 60-day chip. But what I didn't mention to you is I hadn't seen my husband or own children in 67 days. That's 2 months and a week, because I was enjoying the attention I was getting from the men in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was enjoying the little break I was getting from having to be a wife and a mother to those little kids. And I got down off the podium, and this mean old-timer, Cowboy Nick, he walked up to me, and he said, "When are you going to do it different, kid?" And I'm like, you know, the way we do. And it took 2 more drunks, but eventually I completely lost custody of my 2 children, and my mother, my husband, and my sister had to go down to family court. And my poor mother, who's laying in a bed right now in hospice, had to go to a judge that she didn't know and take her 2 little beautiful grandchildren away from her own daughter. What a horrible, selfish thing I did to that woman. And yet I'm coming into Alcoholics Anonymous saying, look what she did to me. And my husband had to go in a courtroom and take his little boy and his little girl away from their own mommy, who happened to be a wife that he loved. And what a selfish, self-centered woman I was. And I came to meetings late and left meetings early, and like I said, I did that mockery. But the day I lost custody of my kids, I was done. And I could not go home. I had a restraining order on me. I didn't have custody of my kids. And I went back to that mean old timer, Cowboy Nick. And I said, Nick, I've just lost my kids, my husband, and I don't have anywhere to live. And I said, I don't ever want to drink again. And that's magic to an old timer's ears. We always get, I need money. I need a place to stay. Hey, man, can you hook me up? You know what? And I just said, I don't ever want to drink again. And he said, sweetheart, why don't you put your hand in mine and let me help you? And I took my hand and I grabbed it. And that old goat sponsored me for the next 12 years of sobriety until he passed away of a stroke. I've been criticized because I've had 2 male sponsors. I want to let you know that I never looked for 2 male sponsors. And Clancy always said, maybe God in his infinite wisdom, Tam, knew that you never really had a dad. And maybe 2 men that always had their house in order with me were able to guide and bring me along. Nick died with 43 years of sobriety, and then Clancy took on my case after Nick. And I don't recommend, nor do I condone that. But Nick always says, hey, Tammy, you seem to be doing okay, and when you're drunk, you can answer your critics. But for right now, don't worry about what other people think at this point, sweetie, because you're doing okay, and I'm grateful for that. Look, at 1 year, and Nick took me, and I started to become sober. Through the grace of God and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I received my custody of my children back after I had a year sober. And for the last 25 years, I've been a sober, intact mom to those kids. I came to you as a kind of high school dropout because I just did the GED exam. And not only was I able to get 1 master's degree, but I actually have 2 master's degrees. And I remember saying to my sponsor, I had a year sober, and I said, you know what? I got my kids back, and I'm going back to school, and I just signed up for 15 units. And he's like, yeah, good asshole, and now go drop 11 of them. And he said, you're not going to do it that way, kid, and you're never, ever going to get so busy in your sober life that your great blessings spoil the very gift you've been given. And he said, you know what? He said, you're going to do this 1 class or 2 classes at a time because you will never call me and tell me I'm going to miss a meeting because I have to study or go to school. And I'm like, so what, I can't go to school? He said, no. You have to go to school like the way a sober alcoholic goes to school, because we're not like normal people, Tammy, and we can't take on those pressures, because if we do, we're going to miss meetings. And you know what? It took me 18 damn years. But I'm going to tell you something. I have 2 master's degrees. And do you know what I have degrees in? I have a master's degree in English language arts. I teach your kids, man. I teach your grandkids, and I teach them the art of language. And I couldn't have a sentence without the F word when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And if that doesn't scare you, like seriously, it should. And Clancy always tells me I'm educated way beyond my intelligence, and I will absolutely agree with him. But I just learned to suit up and show up and do it a little bit at a time. My ex-husband, I'm going to just end. Dr. Rick, when we got a divorce, Clancy would not let me take any alimony or child support, even though a judge decided that I deserved half his medical practice and $4,300 a month for 11 years, which was the half-life of that 21-year marriage. And I went to Clancy and I said, yeah, I'm going to get this much money. He goes, what are you going after, Tam? And I said, spousal support. He said, really? He goes, what's spousal support? I go, that's where you're married to a surgeon, and then you get a divorce, and I get like half his practice that he opened when we were married, and like a whole bunch of money for 11 years, the half-life of the marriage. And he goes, Tammy, spousal support's about putting someone back on their feet again. He goes, that man put up with your drinking. He put up with your sobriety. He paid for you to go to school so you could stand on your feet and be self-supporting. And you're not a goddamn doctor, so you don't get a medical practice. And I said, what do I do, Clancy? And he said, why don't you go ask him what he wants? And the minute Clancy said that, I was telling Ivor, I felt this peace come over me. Because, see, I lived in some type of sober peace for 12 and a half years where I was straight and I wasn't cutting corners and I was working and going to school and raising kids, and everybody else in AA is traveling and they have fancy clothes, and I've got like a backpack with my little Converse shoes, and I just felt like I was going nowhere. But I could lay my head at night, and I was straight up, man. And I was struggling, but I was doing it, and I was starting to build some character. And I went to Rick, and I said, Rick, what do you want? And he said, Tam, I just want my new girlfriend and I want my medical practice. What do you want? And I said, Rick, I drank away the kids' childhood. If I could just have the house, I don't want the kids to have to move and relocate and all of that, and I don't want any money to change hands. And he kept his medical practice and his money. My attorney said I'm a complete idiot and told me he wouldn't work with me. 5 years ago, Rick ended up becoming terminally ill, believe it or not, with the effects of Agent Orange. He served in our Vietnam War, and he was very exposed as a medical surgeon. And because I had the house, my current husband and I were able to bring Rick home. They wanted us to put him in a boarding care facility. They told us that he wasn't viable with life, and I had to drive my son and daughter up, and my daughter was the most painful because she had to walk in and say goodbye to her daddy. And she said, Daddy, nobody was supposed to walk me down the aisle but you, and she was engaged at that time to be married. And it was painful, and he was unconscious on life support. He remained on life support for 15 days. And I went and I held his hand, and I want to let you know, I truly loved my ex-husband the way a wife was supposed to love a man. I wanted him to be here. I wanted him to enjoy his daughter's wedding. And I remember saying to God, he's such a good person, and I'm just such a butthead. Why him and not me? And you know what? I can honestly say I evolved to the point where if I could have been in that bed and let him go on, because he's done so many good things for so many people. And then my husband, Patrick, was standing by my side, and we had to wear these hazmat suits because he was completely septic. And I remember Patrick whispered in Rick's ear, and he said, Buddy, take an Emmy and go on home for a life well lived, because I know you don't want to live like this. Rick didn't die that night, and 15 days later, they took him on off life support, and he started to breathe on his own. 5 months later, after being in the hospital, they told us to find a board and care facility, that he was viable with life, but that he would never walk or talk again. And I remember saying to Clancy, it would have just been better if he's gone. And I said, Clancy, what do I do? And he said, sweetheart, you do the next indicated thing. You go find him a board and care facility and just make sure that he gets the care he needs until the good Lord calls him home. I came home that day from work after looking at these boarding care facilities, and this man who served in our war, who had really done such an amazing job in our community as an OB/GYN and as a civic leader, his life was going to be reduced to just this little bed and a little dresser. And I just couldn't do it. And I told my husband, I feel so crappy. I got this big house that he paid for 21 years, and he's going to be in this little place. And I went to work, and when I came home, my husband's a contractor, and our entire cul-de-sac was filled with Patrick's truck, and he had gutted a downstairs bedroom. We had all these pulleys. He ordered a $6,000 hospital bed. He revamped a shower that you could put a wheelchair in and out. And to make a long story short, from the minute Rick came home, he started to thrive. And 2 years later, he was able to walk my daughter down the aisle, our daughter, and do the father-daughter dance. Now, Patrick will share, Rick still lives with us, and it's been 5 years. But the hardest thing I ever walked through, and I'm going to end with this, is I've been through good and bad times in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been a very blessed woman. But, right now, I live with my current husband and my ex-husband and my 4-year-old adopted grandson and my mentally disabled son. And my mom, who's in hospice, is just like a couple miles down in Tarzana. And I couldn't even take care of myself. And I want you to know I hate pee, I hate poo, and I hate mucus. And I don't like being a caregiver, but God seems to think that this is something I'm supposed to do. So it's like, whatever. But, my son was in college, and he was going to go to medical school like his dad. And that beautiful, beautiful little boy of mine that was a ranked gymnast and such a good guy, he started posting some weird stuff on social media. And his friends and my daughter called and said, Mom, something's going on with Alex. We called the university, and we asked if we could do a welfare check, and they said he's over the age of 18, and they wouldn't do it. So my ex-husband called. He said, man, I'm not calling as his dad. I'm calling as a doctor. Someone needs to do a welfare check on my son. And they found my son in complete psychosis, in a fetal position, hugging a toilet because he thought a monster in the toilet was going to kill him. I said, guy, is he like on meth or is something, like what is wrong with him? We brought him home and they put him in a hospital. And 42 days later, they called my husband, my whole family into this like medical boardroom. And I thought like maybe he had a psychotic break or school was too much. And he was a weed smoker. And I thought, maybe the weed finally got to him. and they said, your son has schizophrenia. And I felt cymbals crashing in my head. And they told us the prognosis and what schizophrenia is. And honestly, you guys, like, I couldn't breathe. And I remember my ex-husband and my current husband on either side of me just holding on to me. And I went to Clancy, and he goes, God damn it, Tami. He goes, he has schizophrenia. Now say it. And I couldn't say it. I'd be like, and I said, schizophrenia. He goes, now there you go. He goes, now Tami, you go learn everything. He goes, you're a student. He goes, I've watched you study all these years. Go learn something about this illness and be the mother that boy needs. And he said, by the way, Tami, how do you know you didn't get sober at that time 23 years ago? So that one day when your boy needed a sober mom to walk him through this difficult journey, that you wouldn't be there. And the minute Clancy said that, the longer you're sober, you start to see all these little things start to come together. And I said, I don't know that God blessed me with sobriety and not these other people who are so much better than me. Maybe I did need to be there for this kid. 3 weeks after he was inpatient, this girl knocks on my door, and she says, hi, Alex is my boyfriend, and I met him on the streets, and I'm pregnant, and I'm going to have his baby, and she was 9 months pregnant. And I'm like, I hate you. It's not hell. It's hell. It's not hot. I'm not here, and go away. And I slammed the door on her. 4 weeks later, I guess they swabbed him in his lockdown facility, and he was the father. And I attended the birth of my little grandson, and I did not want that kid. And I'll tell you something, man, that little boy is the apple of my eye. And I want you to know that I went to UCLA, and I sat in the front row of my schizophrenia caregiver classes, and I still go once a week. And you know what? I am the best sober mom for a schizophrenic son that ever walked the face of the earth. And I can help. And I'm not afraid of schizophrenia, and my son is beautiful, and he lives with us, and he's peaceful, and he's the best dad to that little kid. And we had to adopt him because we have to do some of the more cognitive and support stuff, but that little boy is so loved by his dad. I thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. I thank each and every one of you in Alcoholics Anonymous for God. You know, when I look at people like Clancy and Patty O, you know, man, they did this for 43 years. In Clancy's case, 60 years. And you know what? How do I think, Patty O? Do I stand up here and cry and suck my thumb? Oh, Patty O. You know what I do? And how do I honor Clancy, who's struggling right now with, you know, his own, you know, form of dementia? I suit up and I show up and I carry the message to others that was passed down to me. I honor them with my own actions in Alcoholics Anonymous. So Patty O, man, I'm here taking her place, and I know she's going, it wasn't me, but it's okay, you know? And I was always like a little tomboy and kind of tough, and like, don't hug me a little too long, and no, I'm not a girly girl, and no, I don't want to go out to lunch with you, and I don't want to shop with you. And when my son was diagnosed schizophrenia, I called Patty, and I said, Patty, Alex is diagnosed schizophrenia, and I don't know why I'm so scared, like I just want to be held. And I go, if I come down, I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want advice, I just want to be held, and I feel doughy, and I feel feminine, and I feel vulnerable, and like I used to behead Barbie, and then I'd take her head, and I'd use them as baseballs, and I said, like, I feel so like feminine and doughy, and I'm scared what's happening to me, because I'm so scared, and I've been sober, and I'm feeling all this stuff, and I said, the next thing you know, like, I'm going to be playing with Barbie or some shit, and you know, 2 days later, my husband goes, Tami, you got something in the mail, and it's this freaking Barbie in pink and purple. And she said, it's time. Love, Patty O. Thank you so much.